Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Rhea.
Welcome to Karma's My Bitch, a podcast about
sex,
love,
magic,
desire,
purpose,
bliss,
and how life isn't simply the stories we tell ourselves. Who is the divine? What is the divine? We keep referencing the divine and divinity, and we have a whole season, 4.1, which discusses a lot of this stuff. A lot of our work is based around this stuff. But I'm curious because I think in my head, kind of hear about like the Bible or like other religious texts or guardian angels or all that kind of stuff. But like, what is really the divine?
Yeah. I mean, because we have so many ancient mythologies around the notion of God. And so we equate, or it seems as if the divine is equated with God. And actually, in our version of the divine, it is not.
But what do you mean?
Because we tell stories to heal. And effectively, all of these stories and these mythologies have always pointed to the fact that there is this great being. And we've had to effectively, what these stories are doing is for us to have context around something that because of separation and because of the fall, we couldn't fully experience or see on this earth plane while we're in body.
And the fall is really interesting because we spoke about it in the end of Karmic Adventure as well, about how it's the moment that you realize that you have to survive rather than be the greatest version of yourself, because it's not safe to be the greatest version of yourself. And separation does that. And we discuss how in Karmic Adventure we explain how when you are your whole healed self and you operate fully from your own divinity, you can't fall. But even at the time when I wrote it, I was 100% sure I understood what that meant, because our world is a world of separation, and we are here to lay the foundations for something new. But it doesn't mean that we've not existed in separation and been battered to death by it, literally and figuratively. And so when you hear the stories about the divine, and even that, like, it trickles down to how we know and experience all beings that emanate from the divine, so archangels, angels, deities, all that stuff, guidance for me as well. We've discussed that in our books as well. Not only did I have a quite warped relationship with the concept.
You and everyone else, because every single relationship in separation is highly dysfunctional, if not toxic. I mean, toxic relationship. I mean, I can't say that for everyone, but definitely dysfunctional.
Yes, it became one that was extremely untrustworthy, and one that was ultimately extremely defensive. And we see it in our stories, right? Why did good things happen to bad people? You know, why did God allow this hurricane? Even the stories of the devil. And that's the thing, like, we've been so separate from the divine. Yeah. But at the same time, I found myself just taking it all for granted. You know, there is a God, maybe there isn't a God. I'm going to hedge. Even with doing this podcast, with everything that I've done and experienced, I hedged everything. You know, there's a part of me that wanted to believe because my heart told me to believe, my knowing told me to believe, and everything worked out as a result of my beliefs. But there was always still that little part of me that was like, well, just in case it isn't true, am I still okay? Yeah. I did it through my weird dabbling new age spiritual stuff. Again, as told in Adventure. But, you know, whether it was
like many people do.
Whether I taught myself astrology, whether I was able to channel or not, whether I could read cards. And I even ended up sometimes playing in energy I didn't really know what I was playing in. And that was holding its own whole host of issues. My relationship to the concept of the divine and the divine in some ways strengthened, but also became more twisted.
For all intents and purposes, the divine is not a being as we might understand a being to be because of like our limited experience and imaginations, right? Like it's not a blob of energy or a mutated specimen or a ghost. And it's really difficult, I think, for people to really grasp because, you know, we even use the term spirit. Yeah. And so when we think spirit, we think phantom.
Yeah. Although when we discuss it in our magic books, TBC coming out, we discuss how actually there's the
tripartite.
Yes, I didn't know the word, which one of them is spirit, because spirit is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. Yeah, it's that animated part of ourselves. And it's, as you said in one of the previous episodes recently, it's the bit in that darkness which says, "Get the fuck up. You're bigger than this.
Up. You are. You are not this. And it's so interesting because I think I came across something on social media where it's like, when you're really in your weakest, most vulnerable is when the dark spirits, can identify you and come to you as comfort. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. But it's interesting when we talked about the fall, and there's the story of the angel that falls and is Lucifer, and that's our devil story, right?
But let's be honest, Lucifer, aka the TV show, he's having the best time out of all of us. So.
I mean, my low-key TV crush. The reality is that is just a story to explain the fall. That when you are in separation, you are in a bit of darkness because you are not fully connected.
Yeah.
And because of that free will, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Today's episode is to sort of, if we can just carve away a lot of those stories, can we just see the divine for who it is and what it is, as opposed to having to create a bunch of personas? Because, if you look at the Bible, the Bible God is just one type of God, which other stories will have you also try to understand that because of separation, because of free will, the divine could not possibly exist on this earth plane fully, not the full divine. You're always going to have aspects. So the gods in the Bible, and I say gods because there's more than one. It's just understood as one entity, the divine. You have Yahweh, but you also have what effectively who are also understood to be the Anunnaki. Now, they are really powerful aspects of the divine who could represent God, as in have a lot of the powers, but not be full God. Because again, the divine could not fully exist, right? So we see them as gods, as the God, but still not the divine. So when you're looking at the full divine, as in whole and healed, which we can finally have on this earth plane because of our higher consciousness and be able to connect this divine, we can understand that the divine itself is not made up of matter. And I actually have to go back to say one thing. So the one beauty of New Age spirituality is that if you want to sort of add that to kind of the lexicon around God, at least it broadens our notions. Because when you really think about the sort of classic idea of God, God controls and runs the world. And that's always kind of like, do we have the vengeful God? Do we have the benevolent God? You kind of get whiplash when we think about the different aspects of God and how we're kind of playing in the good and bad. Again, that's just separation and the whole polarity spectrum we have been taught to play in. And the benefit of New Age spirituality and what it's offered us is this idea of, but can we play with that? Can we play with that spirit? Can we play with that power a little bit? And so it helps us and has allowed us to kind of take that power back a bit. So if we can play in it, if we can start to read it, and if we can start to understand it in a different dimension in which maybe we're also players and not just a victim, we get a little bit empowered. So the upside and beauty of New Age spirituality, even though we've kind of poo-pooed it a bit or we've criticized it, and we will continue to be critical of it, is that there is a level of empowerment that has come with it. And that's always been the point. Can we partner with whatever that energy or entity that we believe it to be? So we can think maybe we have a bit more control or say in our lives than we had before, when we were just looking and praying to God to make sure we had a decent life. In the bigger picture, as I said, the divine is not made up of matter, but of life breath.
You laugh, but actually it makes total sense.
Oh, thank God. I'm glad all the pieces have come together. We are just kind of filling up your jar.
No, because if you think about what we were discussing in a previous episode about the all and the breath, when you're one and the other, and how you're the trees and the snow and the animals, it's breath. Mm-hmm. I actually use the phrase life breath. Yeah. In my head.
Oh, so this fuck is not, off. No way.
I swear to God. So this is actually really not shocking to me. I use life breath and life force. Those were the things I said, because what makes us alive, it's not even our souls, it's not even anything, it is what makes us and everything alive.
Exactly.
It animates all things.
Exactly.
So
it's
it exists. It exists, and that's what you're tapping into when we're talking about divine power, you're tapping into everything and everyone that is alive.
Yeah.
In every way.
Precisely. The divine.
I get it.
That's precisely what the divine is. It's the sum total of life force that animates all things. So it cannot possibly exist outside of anything that is not living. Which I think is so beautiful. When they gave me that, I was like, fuck yes, that makes sense now.
Yeah, it does.
And that is why when we use the term God, it almost is too limiting. In broadening this, it really does hold so much more this way.
Yeah,
A bit like bliss.
No, it makes sense. It actually makes total sense.
And what's really tricky about working with the divine and having to share this information and using the divine as kind of like, okay, here's the source of all. It almost doesn't matter who the divine is.
No, because we're kind of saying the source of all things is the source of all things. It's a bit circular in its own special way.
But when we're holding separation in any of our bodies, we really can't possibly conceive fully of who the full divine is.
Well, also because it means that we really are the divine because we are part of that.
Precisely. And that's
And we
really
embody
hard
it.
to own. Because to be able to embody it is to own it's to own the fact that there was a moment in which we rejected it. That's the fall, right? And that is so fucking painful.
I didn't even think of that.
Which is why in our previous episodes this season, we talk about going back to pick up that piece. We talk about going back and saying, in those pieces of like, I am fully alive as I am, and I am always as I am.
Yeah.
The pieces we left behind to survive separation. And those are not the same pieces that, you know, in your karmic chapters where you talk about piece by piece and I have to piece myself back together. It's not the same thing because those broken pieces are the essence of who we are. The love, the hope, you know, the trust, all of that, all of those pieces. And that's the wholeness we speak of in full-bodied and higher consciousness. But the piece we're talking about in this Bliss series is the bigger piece that is the full divine that we have to embody fully again, which requires that piece. Yeah. So
no,
there
but
we
the
go.
thing is, if let's put it in words, right? So
My words were not sufficient.
no. But like, I'm just thinking about it. Like, if you really connect to this idea that everything is the divine, as in the divine is all encompassing of all of this, those moments which caused you to separate. So, for example, the moments I discussed in Karmic Attraction and Karmic Affair and Karmic Adventure, to be fair, I hurt myself. Mm-hmm. I didn't believe, because to understand that I'm the divine and the people that hurt me were the divine, means I hurt myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really hard to feel.
Yeah.
So you prefer to think, actually, I'm not you and you're not me, because that way I can get through this.
Yeah.
And that is the very crux of separation.
And as long as the divine or God is outside of me, it's giving me something to work toward. Again, that's that kind of vertical redemption arc that we talked about in the previous season. It's always keeping us outside, but that always keeps us then disconnected from the divine. So effectively, as we get to know ourselves, we get to know the divine, because that's all it really takes. Reconnecting to our divine selves is how we get
and
to
then
know
you just
the divine.
kind of push that outward, and you're like, and then you're also divine, and then you're also divine, and you're also divine, and we're all fucking divine, and that power runs through all of us.
Yes.
Rather than, because it doesn't show up outside of us. It's a feeling.
Yeah.
You know it. You hear it with the trees rustling. You hear it with your heart beating. You feel it through another's touch, through an animal, through whatever it is. You feel it. You know it.
And we talk about feeling. I think people, depending on how they're hearing feeling, they might think an emotion. They might think it's like a physical feeling.
It's
but
a deep knowing.
It's the deep knowing that resonates through the body, and that's what we call feeling.
Yeah.
So it's just not to be confused with, oh, I feel like I'm feeling loving or whatever today.
Because I for sure would have, I for sure probably thought I felt it many times before. But like, the deeper and deeper you go, the more and more you feel it.
Yeah. It's a resonance, I think, would probably be the most accurate way to describe it.
Yeah.
It's a resonance that just kind of like moves through us.
Yeah.
And that's how we know it's real. And that's why when we had that previous episode again about picking up the piece and whatever, and I think, was there something about the physical body, or we were just working through that ourselves? But that's why in this path to bliss, it is so important where suddenly your healing takes on new meaning, because you're trying to reach that level of resonance that doesn't even come when you're in higher consciousness. It's the beyond.
Because actually without that, you're just playing into the aspects of the divine that came through separation, right?
Precisely.
Because the miracles aren't the things that almost we can see first.
Mm-hmm.
It's that deep knowing that then allows everything to be possible, because you are everything. It's how magic works. It's how everything works.
Precisely.
And once you can tap into that, everything it's limitless.
It really is. And that's really what higher consciousness is. So I don't mean to diminish the importance of higher consciousness, because we have so many books about it. But it's really because higher consciousness allows us to hold all the pieces together and allows us to hold the image of the divine. Mm. But bliss is what allows us to reach it.
Yes. This episode is brought to you by Karma Magic Bliss. For more information, resources, and links to our books, check out our website, karmamagicbliss.com, and Karma Magic Bliss across all socials.
And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review.